Welcome to the Cipher. Step into the Cipher. If you're here checking this out, seeing what we're talking about, make sure you jump in the chat. Let me know. Feel free to comment, ask questions, crack jokes, whatever it might be. Tonight, we're going to be spending a little time talking through Free for the Holidays, which is our line approach to forgiving, forgetting, and family fuckery. Bleepery. Usually at this time we would have Maisha, our Mojo, here to make her signature cocktail, but we don't have her tonight. I'm just gonna be hanging out, having a little bit of fizzy water and cranberry juice because I'm just sort of feeling like just doing it the healthy way tonight. That's about it. But whatever is your libation of choice, please feel free to go ahead and do that. And when we're done with this talk, we will be heading over. There's a Zoom link, and we always go hang out with Q Boogie when we have the cipher. She blends some beats from the 80s through today. Always bangers, always has us dancing. You can chair dance, you can not dance, you can be off camera. We just want to get together, have a good time, enjoy some good music, and head into the weekend and the month feeling good about things. So, gonna get to it. Let me jump in right away, and then we will take questions and reactions and all that later on. So here we go. We're gonna always the awkward moment of sharing the screen. So I'm just gonna go ahead and call that out as awkward. What you want me to do about it? That's the way that goes. And in any moment here, there you go. We have Free for the Holidays and the line approach to forgiving, forgetting, and family bleepery. And the first thing I want to point out is we're going to talk about forgiveness. We're going to talk about times that maybe there's struggles, as you might tell from the title, that there's struggles in our families. And this is not about, just, forgive and forget. We'll talk about that as we go. It's not about anything that is not going to be healthy or aligned with who you are and who you want to be and where you want things to go. And actually, that's the whole point. I think people have the whole idea of forgiveness off, and I'll talk about some of the ways I think we could be looking at it in a more helpful way. And I think that forces people into situations that are very awkward, and that makes them feel like either they have to be at war or they have to just be in full embrace, and that's not really the way that it is. And so we'll get into the details of that, but I just want to call out that that's the energy that we're coming with tonight. So there is the famous phrase, to err is human, to forgive divine. Uh, for us, it's to err is human, to forgive is not enough. It's not enough. You know what I'm saying? It's not enough. And it's not enough for a few reasons. When people say first of all, usually people say, forgive them, right? So they're not speaking of the event that happened to you. Now it's about whether you will forgive this other person. And I think that already starts things off on the wrong foot, because you're, in the case we're talking about, the harmed party, right? Sometimes you're the party doing the harming. That's another set of conversations. But this one is about what we call forgiveness. And I'm just really going to stress that having just that very simplistic view of, forgive them, I think gets people stuck. And I'm going to walk you through how I think we can break this up a little bit so that we're thinking about what happened and you dealing with that, and then dealing with whomever it needs to be dealt with around doing that thing or being a part of that thing, whatever it might be. And then we're going to have the conversation around what we do from there. Now, I have the wrong layout up. So I'm thinking y'all looking at me. Y'all can't see me. Now y'all can see me. So let's take it. Let's go from here. All right. So first of all, to forgive. People might not know this. You might know this. The etymology, where the whole phrase "to forgive," the word phrase "to forgive" comes from, is to release a debt, right? So you're wiping a debt off the books. And again, it doesn't necessarily mean to follow that up. Just because I forgive a debt doesn't mean I have to take another check from you. It just means that I forgive the debt. And I think sometimes to conduct business and move forward in our business and close the books or whatever metaphor or analogy we want to go with, it is necessary to clear the debt, especially if we know that it can't be repaid. And often it can't be, right? There are things that we can do when we're the hurt to apologize or what have you, but the harm has happened. And actually, that's where I want to come with this term, acceptance. And now I'm going to slow down a little bit. When we're harmed in any way, it could be somebody cut us off when we were speaking or something unimaginably terrible. This system that we're talking you through tonight is going to cover that. Okay? So where we are is, if you are fighting that it happened, if you're in that struggle of I can't believe they did that, and you stay there, then that's where the suffering is. That's where the suffering is. And that's got some Eastern piece to it or whatever, but without any of that, just think about it. When you go over it and over it, and I can't believe, and I can't believe, at some point in there, we have to start believing it because it happened, because it's reality. And one of the things that I've been working on personally, those who are familiar with the Align work that we do, one of the things I work on personally is establishing what is our who, right? What is our who? And by that, we have like 3 to 5 words usually, or maybe it's a phrase that just captures like how you need to show up in the world to get to the point, whatever that might be for you. It could be in your life, it could be in the next 15 minutes, it could be whatever. But how do you need to show up? And one of the ways that I talked about showing up now is honest. It's not to say I was being dishonest at other points, but I really wanted to highlight honest. And what I came to is that honesty is the choice to live in reality, right? So, 2 basic ways we can be dishonest is that we know the truth and we give somebody else a lie, right? However we want to define that. I won't get too into the details of that. That's a whole other conversation. But the other is sometimes that we lie to ourselves, right? I will say that in this area of acceptance, I had a habit for years, really until pretty recently in my life, certainly within the last 10 years, where I say, man, forget it. Forget it. Forget it, forget it, forget it. But I was never forgetting it, right? I wasn't trying to be dishonest. I wasn't trying to do anything. I was really thinking I was moving on from whatever it was. And I was in the way of just sort of brushing past it, but I was carrying it with me. I know I've heard a story, and I could get this a little bit wrong, but the point is there, where there are 2 monks, and they come, and there's a woman who wants to get across a road, and the road is muddy, and she doesn't want to mess up, whatever it is that she's wearing. I don't want to butcher this any further. And one of the monks lifts her and helps her across, and then they continue down the road. And about a mile later, the second monk is like, I can't believe that you did that, you touched a woman, what have you. And the monk who had done that said, I put her down a mile ago. And so this other monk had been carrying her all that way. And I know I was carrying a lot of people and events along that way, even after I'd said, I'm good. Forget it. I wasn't actually forgetting it. So when I talk about acceptance, I want you to really think about what that's going to include. For the bigger things, that could include therapy, that could include coaching, which we do, that could include talking to a friend. That could include meditation. That could include, right? I don't want to make this seem as if everything is just, 15 minutes with me and you'll be all set with that, which ails you. Nah, man. Like it sometimes takes some work. But if we can get to that place of acceptance, then we can even deal with what forgiveness, in my opinion, actually is when we're using that term more precisely. Um Now hold on, because I should have been live. And now I'm getting messages that I might not be live. So we're gonna take a second here, folks. I apologize. Um, yes, Align Originals should be there, or we're not there. All right, so I'm gonna keep going, and I'm gonna check back in a few minutes. And if nothing else, this will have been recorded. So there we go. So I am. So I'm. So okay, sorry about that. I'm also being my own producer. So now we're back. I'm pointing us toward that real acceptance of whatever it is. Not just swallow it, move past it, but really embrace it. Right? Like there's a concept of amor fati to love our fate. And I think that's where we have to be to a certain degree. I know it may seem crazy, but I think that's the only way for us to move forward in a way that's best for us. Do the best you can, but live in reality. That would definitely be whether that's part of your who or not. And I want to stress what it says here on the screen. This is not approval. We're not saying it's right or okay in that sense. We're not saying that we agree with it. We're not saying it can happen again. We're not saying anything like that. All we're saying is this thing happened. This is reality. Um, and so that's where we hold on. Now, it's not easy to be your own producer. I'm gonna be honest with y'all. So I'm gonna wait right. I'm gonna pause right here. I'm gonna pause right here because it looks like there's some confusion. And I want to make sure everybody who wants to see this sees this. So if y'all excuse me for a second. I actually had some music. If I had thought of it before I did that, I would have just gone there. Hold on. This is my sister. So just so y'all know, this is, I try to take care of my folks. My sister's been riding for us and coming to all the ciphers, and I had to make sure that folks make it in here. And we're going to get a mod or two sooner than later. So how about that? And we'll be all set. We don't have to worry about it. All right, y'all. I'm back. Gonna move forward, but that acceptance piece is huge. And once we've accepted it, like I said, that's when we can decide to remove it from the books. And think about all the times that we're harmed or something goes wrong and we feel like we're owed something. And I hear people all the time say, life doesn't owe you anything. And maybe I understand what that means. But more than that, I think it does feel like we are owed something. Like something bad happened to us. We may feel we're owed an apology. We may feel all sorts of whatever feel. I'm saying to you, I'm not going to cheat you out of the, you had something happen to you and probably it should be made right or it shouldn't have happened or what have you. And that's fine. But can you remove it from the books? Can you just say, whatever we're going to do moving forward, we're closing the books for that time period or that relationship or whatever it is and moving to the next piece. All right. We've got folks coming in. So confusion solved. And I'm very excited. Okay. So there's a decision to be made. And It's not that you can't change your mind. It's not, but I think there's a decision to be made when we're really looking to handle these moments, these difficult moments when something's gone wrong or we've been harmed or we're upset or whatever the case, whatever the conflict might be. Do we or don't we want to reconcile? Right? And now, often people, especially within families, because that's what made me think to do this tonight, going into November with the Thanksgiving and the holidays and all that coming. And then but then we have to decide: is that what we want to do? Do we want to reconcile? Do we want to continue the relationship? Now, that might be with a company we're dealing with. That might be with our sibling. That might be whomever. But the truth of the matter is that we get to decide that. And that's the piece that I think a lot of times when people say you got to forgive them, that they're combining these two steps in a way that's not helpful. Sometimes it might not be appropriate for what you want for your life, what's best, what have you, for you to reconcile. It might be a moment where people part ways or what have you. And I think it's important to make room for that for ourselves and actually have it be a decision that we make, that we affirmatively are making a decision to be in relationship with this person in terms of talking about, the holidays and family and all that kind of stuff. And the reason I have the South African flag up here is I think it's one of the most powerful examples of reconciliation I've ever been aware of, to have people coming in and at the end of apartheid being able to speak to one another, to talk about harms done, to talk about having done harms, to talk about moving forward. The whole conversation allowed for honesty and healing, and a sense that there was a decision to move forward together that required this, that you couldn't have moved forward without it. And so there's a lot built into reconciliation. And I think just forgive them sometimes, especially for more serious harms or something, that whatever that might be for you. I think combining those is just, it's unhealthy. It makes people feel like if they do forgive them, like they've somehow betrayed themselves on some level, or going in the other direction, that if they don't, that somehow they get stuck in whatever it is that went wrong. And I think we can have the piece of that, of closing the books on an event or a harm, and deal with reconciliation separately. So as we talk about the next couple of steps, I'll be sure to mention, and if you decided not to reconcile, okay, what that would mean. Now, you see the quote here: justice is what love looks like in public. And I once read that quote by Cornel West. And it's funny, you notice things when you're working on something. I've been working on a definition of our own for a lot of the work we do. We use it now, but for some work that we were doing, a definition of love in terms of a line. And what I came to was that love is the investment and the optimization of outcomes for someone or something. And to put that in, simple terms, you want the best for them. You want the best for your favorite team. You want the best for the person in your romantic life. You want the best for your child. You want the best for your parent. Whatever it is, you want the best for your church. You want the best for your synagogue, your mosque, your whatever. You want the best for them. And so I think the power of when I bumped into this quote is like, oh, wow, justice is when we want what's best for the public and in public. And we want best, right, for everyone in the public to be getting their optimal outcomes. Now, sometimes that might be what they want or not want, but we're trying to make sure that we're, optimizing that. And I think it's a powerful model for us societally. But I also think that it helps as we bring that idea into a smaller space. And what I came to is that equity is what love looks like in an organization. And a family is something of an organization. Now, this we also use this when we go into, companies and what have you, conferences and what have you. But in a family, there the equivalent of what Cornel West is describing is for everyone to be invested in everyone having their outcomes optimized. And I think sometimes when there are conflicts in families, someone or a number of people feels like that's not the case, right? Either you don't want the best for me, or you think I don't want the best for you, what have you, but that's where the rub will be. And so when we're deciding to reconcile, if we decide to reconcile, I'm going to encourage you to lean into that piece, to both start with how, well, we get to the empathy piece. I shouldn't jump the gun on that. But to start with, how do I want to, what do I see? Am I invested in the optimization of outcomes for this other person? And if you're not, that's probably a good sign that reconciliation isn't going to be great. But um, if you are, I think that that's a crucial piece to hold on to and to have be something of a North Star we'll talk about for what. Now, I want to pause here and say, and we're going to talk about energy later. Reconciliation doesn't necessarily mean the relationship is going to be just like it was. For example, South Africa, right? It was actually that the relationship was going to be drastically different than it ever was. And so I don't want you to feel that there has to be the same level of closeness or this or that. But if you're going to have some version of the relationship continue forward, I think these are important. This is an important piece for you to pause and look at. Are you invested in the optimization of outcomes for the other person? Do you want what's best for them? We'll talk about whether or not they want what's best for you or you think they want what's best for you as we go forward. But that's our reconciliation. Okay, empathy. So I am a nerd on a number of levels, but one of the things that I'm big into is stoicism. It's philosophy, but stoicism is what really started me down that path. So we have this quote: "Everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth." And I want to really focus on that second sentence because even when we're 100% sure that we've got all the facts right, and we know about eyewitness testimony and all these things, we're not nearly as good at this as we all swear we are, right? There are people who report seeing things that never happened, But remembering that we have a perspective is really important because it allows us to allow, sorry about that, for other perspectives, right? It allows us to allow for other perspectives. And I think it's really important for two different reasons. But first, I'll talk about it in terms of reconciliation. I think it's really important that we empathize with the other party. That doesn't, again, mean that what they've done is okay. It doesn't mean anything. It just means that we are going to consider their perspective of the situation. We're going to try to understand it. I've told the story. We do a number of things with coaching, and because it's sort of a philosophy and a more holistic approach, one of the things that we've done is what I call aligned relationships. I was working with someone the couple was having a conversation about whether or not they were going to have a child. And it was a real, like, just everybody was dug in and here they go. And their assignment, we have names for it, but their assignment for this conversation was to, in good faith, right? In good faith, they were to prepare the opposite argument. They were going to sit down and make the opposite argument with their just full throated in the other direction. And ultimately they made their decision. I'm actually not gonna say what their decision was because I think it's irrelevant. Because the point is that they were able to step away from their perspective, step back, remember that it was a perspective, and then consider the perspectives for others of the other. And it really, I know for conversations that I've had with them that it really strengthened their relationship. So as we do our preparation for whatever it might be, Thanksgiving, or if it's Christmas, or it's Kwanzaa, or it's New Year, or it's, first Sunday in December, we always get together, whatever it might be, as you're preparing for whatever the exchange might need to be, or whatever the interaction is supposed to be, or how you're going to handle all this, there is value. There is real value in considering the other person's perspective. Now, that may seem it's very sweet. It is, and it can be, or I should say. But I also think it helps us to operate more effectively. Right? I mean, think about any negotiation you're in. And really, I've had people talk about the fact that everything in life is a negotiation. That tends to get a little cutthroat, but whatever. It doesn't have to. And I think there's something there. And understanding what the other person wants, understanding what the other party doesn't want, understanding what they need it to look like, understanding what kind of language might be most effective. There are all sorts of things that when we really invest in empathizing, I know there's some people who aren't too excited about empathy these days, but I assure you, it is well worth our time. You're going to be better prepared for the negotiation part of things as well. And when you're invested in the optimization outcomes for the other person, you're going to be most likely to come up with mutually beneficial solutions. Basically, something that's win-win, something that works for both of you, or all three of you, or whoever, whatever it might be. But something that goes beyond, I want this. Um, it doesn't mean abandoning what you need, right? At all, actually. But it means it might give you insight and perspective in this sense to then say, oh, wait a minute, what if we do it this way or that way? So really encouraging you to lean into this piece. Now, in the case that you're not interested in reconciliation, why empathy? I think it's more than an exercise. And I think as we're removing the debt from the books, like we talked about when we forgive, I think it helps to have some distance. Again, it doesn't mean it's okay. It doesn't mean, oh, now I understand them, or we have to, no, none of that. But again, it gives us some power, to consider their perspective gives us some perspective, right? That whole, there's three sides to every story thing. So I think we're most likely to start at least having a sense of that third side if we at least can consider the second side, if that makes sense. And I hope it does. And then finally, the final E. If you have questions, put them in the chat. I see a few folks have shown up. So, throw your questions or comments in the chat. So the last piece is energy. And I'm, it's a little tongue in cheek here. You can't have your energy and spend it too, right? So you know the phrase, you can't have your cake and eat it too. And people say, oh, what do you mean? If I can have a cake, why would I want to eat it? But the whole idea is, right? I mean, if you eat the cake, you no longer have the cake. And as I thought about how to express the piece around energy that I'm going to get into with you right now, if you expend energy on person A, you don't have that energy for person B. We have a certain capacity. It might feel like some days it's more capacity than others. Um, but there's some capacity. There's some point at which we're out of energy. There's some point, and exhaustion can feel like I need a good night's sleep, but exhaustion can also be emotional exhaustion. It can be psychological exhaustion. And so I think it's a matter of being healthy, taking care of ourselves, and making the removing from the books mean something. We have to decide how much energy we feel is appropriate for the kind of relationship we do want to have if we're doing the reconciliation with this individual. And people talk about paying attention, right? Don't pay them any attention. Don't pay them any attention. And I started playing with that idea, and I don't want to get too cute with this thing, but I started playing with that idea of like paying attention. Like, don't pay them any attention. Don't pay them any attention. I was like, you know what? That's right. We don't want, where we can avoid it, to put very much energy where we pay attention. I think we want to move in terms of investing attention. Where is placing my attention nurturing a relationship or building a skill or developing, right? Whatever it might be, right? It might just be, helping create a tighter family unit, or it might be whatever it might be. Where am I getting a return on this attention? And if you're spending your attention in places where it feels like you're paying attention, where you're just spending it and it just is gone. We've all done that, right? You started the day with some money in pocket, you end the day with no money in pocket, right? And you don't feel like you have much to show for it. But sometimes we put ourselves in a position where we do have something to show for it. And I think it's really important that we try to identify where in our lives that's true. Where the people in your life who, when you get off the phone with them, you get off a call with them, a FaceTime, a Zoom, or whatever it might be, you just feel a little better. The people in your life who, when you need a recharge, they seem to have something there for you, and the people for whom you're able to do that, right? Because I think there's power in that piece too, and helping each other along. But being intentional about where the energy does go, where we're investing attention as opposed to paying attention. And we're all going to have ways in which we pay attention. We can't invest attention in every single interaction we have, even within our families. But I think that when we're clearest about that, we're most likely not to overspend, if you will, where there's really no return on the investment. And I think for a lot of us, that becomes part of the overall challenge of family and hurt feelings and what have you, is like, whoa, I thought I was investing, and maybe that's not the case. Or I thought you were going to invest in me, and that's not the case. So really being intentional and conscious about that piece is critical. Once, and I'll wrap this piece up, once upon a conversation, somebody said to me that a budget is not just a fiscal document is also a moral document. That stuck with me. That stuck with me. I think about it nationally. I think about it statewide. I think about it in my household, right? If you couldn't say a word, somebody saw how you spent money this year, what would they surmise is important to you? What would they surmise is irrelevant to you? Um, would you be proud of it? Would you not? Maybe it being a question, but I think this is true too. If I try to look at my life in terms of, and sometimes I do better than others, right? We're all on this journey, but I try to look at my life in terms of if somebody followed me around this week, this month, this year, would I have to tell them, oh, my family's very important to me? Or would they know that? Would I have to tell them, right, that whatever, my business is important to me, or whatever it might be, or building a line of ridges is important to me? Would they know that by watching me? Or would I then have to come in and give my rah rah speech to sell them on it? And I think that becomes a way for us to check ourselves. There's so much in this world right now around brand, like what's your brand? And I think that there's something powerful there when we look at it in an authentic way. But I think we want to be looking more and more at who we are as opposed to who we seem to be. And I think in our families, that matters too. I think in all relationships, organizations, like I said to you, it's the same from the individual relationships to companies and clubs and organizations up to society at large. I mean, these are all the same conversations, and a lot of the same things will have to happen to heal. I don't even want to get into too much of it, but any number of conflicts on a much wider scale, and what we're dealing with here. And so, where are you spending your energy? Which relationships? Where do you want to spend it? How much do you want to spend? Get clear on that piece. And I just want to wrap up by laying these out: forgiveness, reconciliation, empathy, energy, as being the way we free ourselves from hurts and traumas. I'm not saying it's easy. As I shared, any number of these steps you might take, depending on what you're dealing with, you might take years, right? I mean, I'm not trying to prescribe that piece. You might need professional support. You might need support from your community, your friends, your family, all sorts of things. Um, I found that mindfulness work helped me with every piece of this here has been impacted by the mindfulness work I've done, the meditating, thinking about these things, considering like, well, what is forgiveness actually? That time spent, philosophizing on the ways of God, and if you know Boys Nudge, you know the rest of that line. But forgiveness, reconciliation, empathy, energy. Free yourself from trauma. And whether you do reconcile or don't, I think you'll be glad you did, because I think sometimes that difference between a trauma and an event that was hurtful can really be the difference between reliving it and remembering it. And I think sometimes the pain we go through reliving these things really makes sure that not just that particular relationship might be fractured, but that a lot of things in our lives might be damaged by our not being able to be in that acceptance spot, in that honest spot of being in this moment, facing what actually is. So believe it and then move forward from it. And that is that. So I'm checked. I've been peeking over at the chat. I haven't seen anything yet, but I'm new to this, so I'm gonna double check that we have No question there. Okay, we got one here around. Okay, so we got Sarah. Okay, I get it. So having a challenge of a person who is saying you need this is family and sort of forcing the issue. And look, family politics, like any other politics or any other organs, it can be complicated. You may not be in a position sometimes to fully move away from reconciliation, right? I mean, sometimes it's just the reality of our lives. Whatever the relationship may be, might not allow for that. Um, but I do think, again, I think that's the energy piece. I think we get to decide how much we are invested. I think we get to decide how much energy we're going to put into it. And so my advice there would be just continue to walk through this, right? The forgiveness piece of closing the books on that, even if it's a humongous debt, it's still up to you. You can figure that piece out. Whatever the reconciliation needs to look like, making that as, as aligned with what you want and need as you can. And then that empathy piece, and again the energy piece. So I would say that's always a challenge. I think lots of us have been in that situation where they're like, oh, but you have to forgive so and so, or what have you, or oh, everybody's going to be there, whatever it might be. But I think there's still work to be did that to do there. It looks like we're having trouble getting comments in the chat. Um, but the comment is, but I love the piece about having empathy for others. I feel there's a general sense that understanding someone's perspective means agreeing with their perspective, but that isn't true. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's Aaron. Thank you, Aaron. Um, really important in this, because I think people have empathy all wrong in terms of thinking exactly what you just described, which is, oh, well, if I'm taking a walk in their shoes or what have you, that means I'm saying that they're right, or that, and none of that is true. I'm saying sometimes there's value, and we're broadened out from this kind of, but sometimes there's value in trying to get clear. I'm still getting used to this new camera, so sorry. Sometimes there's value in trying to get clear, even when you think the other person's viewpoint, to just put it simply, is bonkers. But like to try to figure out, like, but what's their logic can still be helpful in the conversation, even if in the end you're like, that's wild, like that's not at all how I see it, or that's not at all what happened, whatever. There's still that power there. So yes, I agree. Having that empathy can be important, and I think also helps us to think about how we showed up in a certain situation. Um, I will bring up marriage carefully, but sometimes before I react or respond, I'm like, I did kind of come in here a little grumpy. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe I'm getting back some energy that I put out there, and even that very quick moment can just sort of diffuse what could have been an hour of not great communication into that 2 minutes that just happened, right? Um, so I think the empathy piece can also help us to see ourselves through others' eyes, at least to some degree, and get clear there. And I'm not sure what the deal is with the chat. I'm gonna try something real quick, but y'all should be able to communicate. Yeah. Let me see here. Nope. All right. Well, I am actually I'm going to make up some questions. That's what people do all the time anyway. People make up questions all the time. And to me, the obvious question is, what if the other person doesn't want to reconcile? Let's that. All right. Let's say, or it does and you don't, right? Again, allowing for realities of life, we still, even if I have to stay in relationship with someone, I still get to govern like how much of me, like the me part of me, I'm gonna hand over to the other person. That part I get to control. And there's all sorts of a line work we could talk through, and we will over the months. But that we can make choices about, well, what is that going to look like? And sometimes having all that clarity going into a situation, and even just working from this, from the empathy and the energy, you can know like, okay, if this occurs, this is how I'm going to move, and relieve some stress and some anxiety and so on about the situation, because there you are. You know what I mean? You planned for this, you thought it through. Oh yeah, and then they bring up my weight, right? I'm gonna say blah and get it. Or I'm gonna get up and go to another room. Or I'm just gonna sit there and act like I didn't hear it, or whatever it might be. And I just bring that up because I feel like that's the kind of thing that folks and families think they can get away with. Bring it up, and sometimes it doesn't go so great. So, but whatever it might be, whoever it might be, I think this work also allows us to feel prepared. And I don't know about you, but for me, if I feel somewhat prepared, you can't prepare for everything, but if I feel somewhat prepared, it at least helps me to feel a little less anxious. And oftentimes it helps me to reduce. I'm definitely somebody who will catastrophize or just sort of let it spiral out and put me in a place where I'm like, what's the likelihood of X, Y, or Z? It's probably going to be A, B, or C. And I think I can handle those this way. So it also, I think, sort of brings the energy down, um, and then it places you in charge of your experience, what you're gonna do. And I think often also in families is sort of the power dynamics of things, and feeling like maybe things aren't under your control, or your situation is under your control. So it gives you a chance to say, okay, what are the pieces I do control? And actually, I came up with a mantra I'll share here as we're wrapping up. But I came up with a mantra that goes along with that, where I say, I am powerless, I am powerful. Where is my power? And it's a lot like the Serenity Prayer. It's a lot like sayings and all sorts of traditions. But basically, that came to me in a meditation, and so I use it for me. It really resonates. And when I ask that, where is my power? There's usually a pretty clear answer as to whether or not the thing that's bothering me in that moment is under my power. And when it isn't, it becomes a lot easier to say, okay, gotta release it, because I've gotten clear on that. And I mean, truly to the point where I, can find myself frustrated about global issues, and have to rein it in and say, okay, like what can you actually do about that right now, and then move forward. So I think there's a lot of value there. Also, because then once I let that go, then I can do things like record the cipher and come up with frameworks and do the things that are actually adding value to the world around me in ways that suffering over things I don't and can't control just doesn't. So I am sorry about the chat. I'm not sure what happened there. I am going to investigate that because we would very much like to hear from y'all. Um, but for those of you who are joining us for the party portion of the cipher, we have our link here. If you go to our Facebook page, we'll have the link to the Zoom link in the comments there. And I'll actually go into YouTube itself to make sure that the Zoom link is there as well. So I'll do everything directly, since we're not quite sure what the communication deal is. But if you have the link, we will see you over there in just a minute. I'm gonna shut this down and put that link up, and then head on into our Zoom, and we'll be kicking in with Q Boogie in just a minute. Thanks for being here, y'all.